Kristen, thanks very much for the reporting.
And joining us now, Democratic Congressman from New York, Daniel Goldman. Congressman, I always appreciate your time. I wanted to ask you, behind closed doors at the House Democratic Caucus retreat yesterday, I'm told the president gave a little preview to how frustrated he was with a little bit more, maybe less TV-friendly profanity to some degree. Are you aware that, did you get some of that information last night before that hastily called press conference?
I did not personally get that. I think he met with Leader Jeffries and some of the other leadership members. But what I did understand from talking to folks at the White House is that part of the problem and part of the frustration with Special Counsel Hur, a Republican appointee, cherry-picking very few remarks from a 5-hour interview is that there are other occasions where President Biden demonstrated tremendous recall of very specific conversations from years and years ago that were not included in the report. And given the very, very flimsy evidence that the special counsel relied on to even say that he willfully retained the classified information, it does appear as if this became a justification for the special counsel's investigation, and that in order to inure himself, a Republican appointee, from criticism by Republicans because he did not charge President Biden, who cooperated fully, whereas Donald Trump was charged partially because of his extreme obstruction of justice, he wanted to deflect from his ultimate decision. And I think that's why this report is misguided, both in its conclusion and its excessive editorializing.
Now, I think the rationale that the special counsel's team used for talking about the mental acuity or talking about whether or not he remembered specific things is in the report. It says at trial, Mr. Biden would likely present himself to a jury, as he did during our interview of him, a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with poor memory. They were trying to back up that statement in their decision, particularly specifically on the notebooks that they believe had been shared with the ghostwriter, why they did not believe that they could win in trial on the issue of willful retention and dissemination. You don't think that backs that up?
Yeah, but it's unnecessary. No. First of all, the evidence that they gathered that he knowingly and willfully retained classified information while he was a private citizen, which is necessary, and the special counsel discusses that, is based on such thin evidence. And when you're talking about notebooks versus actually marked classified documents, that's a significant difference, because President Biden, as part of his job, took copious notes. Some of it must have been unclassified information, some of it unclassified. And he understandably believed that his notes were his and they didn't have classified markings on them. That's a big difference. And so what you really need to look at is what marked classified documents did he possess that he knew he possessed and maintained. And the notion that his own credibility or recollection would have anything to do with the evidence, which was plainly insufficient, is a fallacy. And not only that, but you're assuming that the defendant in this case would testify at trial. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I did not consider the defendant's credibility as a witness. I may have considered the defendant's credibility in explaining the evidence and whether or not it would rise to the level of knowing intent. And so this was extremely gratuitous, unnecessary, and it was just a political potshot in the middle of an election year when the special counsel knows that it's two elderly men who are running for president, and this one who was appointed by Donald Trump wanted to make sure that he got his licks in.
Do you think the president helped himself last night in his response?
I do. I think what the president standing out there really powerfully explaining how absurd it is that there would be accusations that he would not remember when his son died, which was, such a critical moment. And it was important, I think, for him to show, as he did in answering the question about the Middle East, how much of a grasp and how experienced and wise he is, especially right now on foreign policy issues. And I spoke to him on October 7th when I was in Israel, a couple hours after the Hamas attack. And that was the day before this interview began. And he demonstrated an unbelievable mastery of this entire region. He had already reached out to a number of different leaders. He understood all of the vortexes and all of the issues and tension points. This is someone whose age has a tremendous benefit in his experience and his understanding and his knowledge of foreign policy.
Certainly.
Going back many, many years.
The message she was
and
trying
that
to
has
get
been to our benefit in Ukraine. Yeah, and that's been to the benefit as he's rallied allies in Europe against Ukraine.
What it also created, though, is
dealt with a difficult situation.
I understand. What it also created, though, was a moment where he conflated or mixed up Mexico with Egypt. And to be clear, a couple of hours later, Donald Trump thought the leader of Hungary was actually the leader of Turkey. This is just a name flip, but it's a moment, and it's a moment at a time when voters are concerned. And I know the president pushed back on that. People get frustrated about that, but it's just true.
Yeah, it's also true that Speaker Mike Johnson went on Meet the Press and confused Iran and Israel, which is a much more significant mistake than President Sisi as being in Mexico. But I'm not going to sit here saying Mike Johnson has no memory loss or, that he's ill-equipped to be Speaker of the House because he made an obvious incidental, tangential mistake. And it's wrong to think that because President Biden made a simple incidental mistake that everyone understood what he was referring to, that has anything to do with his mental acuity. And especially when you're now trying to compare him to another elderly man who is charged with 4 indictments, who doesn't believe that the law applies to him and makes all these mistakes. Nancy Pelosi, Nikki Haley, Donald Trump makes more mistakes on this stuff than Joe Biden does. And for some reason, the media doesn't want to focus on that. But he is a danger to our country, Donald Trump, whereas Joe Biden has been a tremendous asset to our country as our leader.
I want to ask you one more thing on a different topic before I let you go. Elise Stefanik, she is a member of your New York delegation's Republican conference chair. You two have tangled a little bit, particularly over the issue of January 6th. And she had to sit down with my colleague, Caitlin Collins, last night, where Caitlin asked, she's on a short list for vice president. I think everybody is aware of that. Had she been vice president on January 6, 2021, would she have done with what Mike Pence did? And she made very clear her answer was no. And I'm interested in what you think of that.
I think it is unbelievably revealing and incredibly shameful. She issued a statement on January 6th castigating and chastising those who attacked the Capitol, saying they should be prosecuted. She has now erased that statement and is now going back and saying that she would have overturned a lawful election if she were the vice president. So you not only have someone at the top of the ticket who is overtly anti-democratic and wants to be a dictator, but you have someone vying to be his vice president who knows better, frankly, who is also willing to go along and overturn a lawful election. That should scare the American people because that is anti-democratic, and that is going to lead us down a very, very dangerous road if there's a yes person as vice president who will do whatever Donald Trump wants.
New York Congressman Dan Goldman, always appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil.
Important conversation with him, for sure. 3 words reveal possible rifts that are bigger now. The words mean everything, really, between the U.S. and Israel.